Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jason Whitehead. I'm CEO of Tritons, and thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Jason's Take On. And today we're going to be talking about what it means to be customer-centric. You hear a lot about that in the literature, but there's a lot to talk about and a lot of great things to go in. So just a few housekeeping things before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, so the recording will be made available probably within about 48 hours after this session. It'll be up on the Tritons website as well as on our YouTube channel. And as we go through, we really love your questions, so please go ahead and type them in the Q&A box, not the chat box, because there are two here. And you can enter those at any time, and we'll try and save them to the end. We've already had a couple of questions, which is great. We try to target about 30 minutes for discussion and presentation, and then for about 15 minutes of questions. And sometimes we go a little bit faster, sometimes a little slower, but that's usually about where we land on this. So those are the housekeeping items. I'd like to just introduce myself real quick, then I'll turn it over to my co-host. My name is Jason Whitehead. As I said, I'm the CEO of Tritons, and we are a customer success and software adoption training and consulting company based right outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland. I've been working in this space for over 20 years now, many years as a consultant, a few years internally at a Fortune 100 company managing a CRM implementation there, and before that, several years as a consultant doing hands-on technical implementations of CRM and other enterprise systems. What's been really exciting for me has been the shift in the past few years, to really focusing on how to make sure that we're not just getting systems live, but they're actually getting value from it, and the people are using it as part of their day-to-day work experiences. And that's really a lot of where my work is focused, is helping to make sure people change their daily work practices to embrace technology to get a better value from it. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm going to turn it over now to my co-host, Jason Noble from the UK. Jason?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, I think. I'm Jason Noble, so the co-host with Jason here. I've been around in the technology customer space for a good few years, 20 plus years as well. I moved into the technology space back in the good old days of licensed on-premise software, working to start with in financial services, helping to build customer service, support operations for a range of technology providers, both startups and larger enterprise level organizations. I then moved and grew into the world of service delivery, account management and program management, working with larger companies like Sony. My focus has always been about the customer. As I said, they've all been in these customer-facing roles, and I've led and built a number of different customer-facing functions. And it's now, for me, kind of all naturally come under this really great umbrella called customer success. I'm now working with doing consultancy and advice for organizations that are going through their own customer transformation programs. So the essence really of what this session is about, so helping them be more customer-centric, put the customer at the heart of what they do. And I'm super passionate about this. I think you'll get from the conversation. I'm a big believer that the customer is at the front of everything we're doing. There's a lot of decisions businesses have to make now that are driven by our experience as consumers. And it's just so exciting to see businesses as change and going in this direction, and this ever-changing and growing world of customer success. One thing we want to quickly talk about is this is a new series of webinars we're doing. This is the second one. So welcome, everybody. The idea is to do these once a month, and we will be sending out kind of future series. You can see what the proposed topics are, and there'll be a very similar structure. So it's me and Jason just having a fireside chat, really. Why the series? Why have we both got together doing this? I think Jason and I both got introduced to each other at an event back here in London earlier in the year, this year, about April time. It was an unplugged session then. Jason and I both speaking at separate talks. But we are both super passionate about doing everything right for the customers and putting the customers at the heart of what businesses do. And we think we've been here since really the idea and evolution of customer success came about. I think, as you'll hear from the conversation, thinking about the customers isn't something new. Actually doing it is becoming quite difficult. But it's something that we've seen in its early days transforming to what it is now. We both can see from the work we've done, the customers we worked with, the value that it brings to businesses, and the return on investment they can get from it, and the critical need for doing it now. We've also both worked through a lot of the challenges that we're seeing with customer success emerging as a new discipline, as people seeing it as a new career path, as new leaders coming into that role, where it fits in the organizational structure. So we've got a lot of experience around those. And I think we also want to help people just feed off our experiences and see how to see things differently and how you can progress in the career here. I think one thing we've both found, and I'm sure all of you guys agree, is that the customer success community is one of the most, if not the most collaborative community that there is. And this is our way of sharing our own learnings within the community. We want this to be an interactive session, as Jason said, so please do ask the questions back to us. What we'd also ask as well is we want people to be bold. We're going to talk through some things that you can do and take away from this and actually do something with tomorrow. But please try and be bold, challenge that existing way of thinking and find new ways of working. We want people to get started now. I think there's a lot of information coming. There's a lot of framework suggestions of how you should do this. But what we want to do is let people to get started, not really let fear and uncertainty hold you back, but really get going. And even if it's something small that you build on, start small and you can build it to something big. So the topic we're going to talk through today, this conversation is really going to focus about what it means to be customer-centric, why businesses see it as being a big challenge. And we're going to talk through some of the different aspects on what customer centricity means, what we think it means, some good examples of business out there that do it, talk through the business case for being customer-centric, why there's a need to do it, more about what the challenges are, some of the tactical changes and more strategic changes and actions that you can take within your own organizations as to how you start along that journey there. And there are a number of takeaways that we'd like you guys to really come away with here. One is a good understanding of what we believe it means to be customer-centric, why it's different to what a lot of people think it is, why it's important to today and why we need to shift in the way we're thinking and why we need to talk about it, what the elements of change are needed, and that's covering both, there's three of them, sorry. One is a strategic or organizational change, tactical things that you can do, and then the other one is a bigger one around behavior and mind shift change. We want you to really to start thinking about that. Then the last point is, as I said earlier on, it's for you guys to actually come away with your own calls to action from this and be bold and be able to take actions now. We've got a number of questions that we're going to bounce back each other and just share our thoughts on. And I'm going to kick it off with the first one and throw it back to you, Jason. Can you just talk us through what do you think it means to be customer-centric?
Sure thing. Thanks, Jason. That was a great intro as well, too, to the series and the topic. I think it's really tough to sort of say specifically what it means to be customer-centric because there's really no simple definition out there. And, you have lots of conversations and lots of talk about it. And, I've also found a lot of organizations pay lip service. But when you look at how they actually behave and act and make decisions, you're like, is that really customer-centric? And I think for me, and, Jason, jump in here as well, too, a business is really more customer-centric when it delivers that ongoing growing value to and for its customers. And it's not just about now in the short term, but really looking at that long-term perspective. And what is it for our customers? What do they need? How do we make their needs and their value from our product or service be at the heart of everything we do, and then work backwards from there? I think there's a lot of organizations out there where it's also, they may have just a person or a team or sort of this group is supposed to be customer focused and bring it back to the rest of the organization. But really, how do you inject into the DNA of your organization, the culture that the customer is at the heart of everything we do? And as we're making decisions and as we're making choices about where we go and prioritize and put in the resources, that is really from that customer lens first. And I think for some of this, it's the idea that if you do the right thing by the customer and you really have their best interests at heart, not only will they benefit, but they will stick with you and give you great reviews and reputation, be a promoter of yours. But ultimately, that will result in the business outcome that you want for yourself, which is typically that increased revenue and expansion, all of those great things. But you get there by focusing on the customer needs and have that little bit of faith that will happen. I think there's also the whole idea of, really putting yourself in the customer's shoes first and sort of saying, if I'm the customer, what would this mean for me and my organization? And what sort of things would make it better and sort of working from there. and then work backwards, say, how do you meet those needs, or what are the other opportunities to help the customer get even more value from your product or service or the relationship with you, and to have that positive feeling about it. And, Jason, when we were talking, you mentioned also the quote from Jeff Bezos at Amazon, which, customer obsession is not just about listening to your customers. Customer obsession is also about inventing for your customers. And I think there's so much to that. And really, that's the heart of being customer-centric in a lot of ways.
I think you're so right there, Jason. I love that quote there from Jeff. I think Amazon are one of those companies that I personally love the customer experience with them. I think it's been my de facto shop for the Christmas, the holiday period. But they've got everything right about that customer obsession. And I think it's interesting where he says about customer obsession being about inventing for your customers. And we're going to touch on it later on, but it's about innovation. Our customers come to us because they want us to not only provide them with a great experience, the outcomes they want, but actually show that growing value, as you said earlier on. And that for me is one of the key things, at the essence of customer centricity, is how do you demonstrate growing value? And you've got to be there as a thought leader for your customers and be ahead of them. So invent new things. When you see what multiple customers are doing, take all that data, start kind of predicting how they're going to use your services, your products, where they will see ongoing value. And I love that. So it's talking about the what we're doing now, but also that future opportunity with customers, which for me is really, really key. There's another quote that we read the other day as well, Jason, that I just mentioned, the Harvard Business Review. And it says here that the most common and perhaps the greatest barrier to customer centricity is the lack of a customer-centric organizational culture. At most companies, culture remains product-focused or sales-driven, or customer centricity is considered a priority only for certain functions. Now, the quote ends by saying certain functions such as marketing. I differ. I'd argue and say that, well, actually, we're seeing customer success being pushed out there as the customer-centric function, but that needs to shift, and you need every single department. It isn't just about, as you said, Jason, it's not about one department. How do you get every team in the business thinking about customers?
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. And I think, one of the things that we haven't really talked about too much, but the quote from Jeff Bezos and Amazon is, is there more customer centricity in the B2C world than in the B2B world? And what are some of the lessons there for customer success teams?
I think the answer is yes. I think when we were chatting about it yesterday, some examples of great customers that do great customer centricity, I think the answer is a lot of them still are in the B2C world. And I actually think that a lot of, we spoke last time about, when we talked about the leadership challenges, but a lot of the drive that we're seeing for these changes in how people are expecting you as a service provider or business to work are driven by B2C services and what our expectations are as customers, as consumers. And really that businesses have to be really responsive to how we're changing as the ultimate end users. And it's a real shift that we're seeing, and an ongoing and developing challenge.
Yep, it definitely is. Which I think leads into our next question quite nicely, Jason, which is, why is it such a challenge for businesses today to be customer-centric?
I think that there's a number there, and as I've already highlighted, that one between us as consumers and our expectation. I think that is fundamentally at the heart of it. The expectation that we want things anywhere, anyhow, anytime. That's fundamental now. If you look at my own kids, technology and good service is ubiquitous. That is now resonating throughout the ecosystem, from consumers up to businesses. So that's one of the biggest challenges. I think there is this shift that the team at Zora talk about, the change from ownership to consumership, from experience. So we are changing to more focus on consumption of goods, not owning goods. We were talking earlier on about driving, and how I really do think that the next generation probably won't own cars. It will be renting, and it may even be renting and subscribing to cars that are automatic. But it's a very different service you want. How do you maintain that relationship? So customers, businesses have to start thinking longer term than it's just about that sell, and that requires a big mind shift. I think there's also the need to be really agile and nimble and responsive to
Mm-hmm.
customers. I think this again goes to the heart of what customer centricity is about. It's a very different way of working. Things are changing so rapidly in just in industry, in commerce generally. A business that is customer centric is a business that can respond to how their customers changing. So you have to be an organization that is able to shift. And we're seeing some of the more historical businesses that have been around for 5, 10, 15 years struggling with some of those changes at sometimes. I think we all talk about it in customer success, but we think about putting the customer first. What do we have to shift to make other people in the business put the customer first? And get, it isn't just customer success. I want my finance team to put the customer at the forefront of what they're doing. Product, sales, marketing, everybody. And how do you as customer success help that? I think there is it is, as we said earlier on, it's about outcome and service. It has been about product. It's now about outcome and service and what we want there and what we want customers to do. I think people talk historically about the idea of stickiness. And I don't like that term. It kind of implies that they're stuck. There's no choice there.
Right.
And I said to you earlier on, Jason, I'm a physicist at heart. I like the phrase gravity. It applies more of an attractive force. The customer wants to be with you. They want to stay with you. And that we're going to see more of it. That stickiness is actually going to slip away and people are going to be able to change on the B2B side. And I think we're going to see more and more and more about this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's really important. And, coming back to that whole theme of B2C, B2B, I think it's interesting with B2C, the individual consumer makes their own decisions of whether to stay and come back or whether to renew, or even just your experience at a restaurant. If it's horrible, you're not going back, kind of thing. But in the B2B world, there's so many more relationships and complex relationships, and the decisions on whether to remain a customer or to expand are generally not held with any one individual and can't happen quickly when you think of all the other factors. But frankly, I think, a lot of companies have gotten lazy because they've thought for a long time, it's very hard for our customers to leave. And that comes back to that stickiness piece, which, a customer deciding not to leave is not the same as the customer wanting to stay. And I think, that's your gravity example right there. I think there's also, go ahead.
No, go on. Sorry, Jason. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think there's also, people are not quite sure what to do to be more customer centric, and they talk about it. Maybe they even genuinely want to, but either they don't know how to, or there may be a lot of fear and uncertainty, and either they're in their individual interactions with customers, or there may be other pressures or constraints within their own organization. When we go and actually train a lot of customer success managers, many times what comes up is that the CSMs are actually lacking the confidence to guide and lead the customers, and challenge them a little bit, even though by doing so, it would give an ultimate better outcome and a better experience for the customer. Instead, they're, for their own personal reasons, many of them struggle to get out there and would rather be reactive and keep the customer happy, as opposed to giving them a great experience, which also are not the same thing.
I think that's so right. And I love your point there, because I don't think you'd never get an organization that says, look, we're not about the customers. It just doesn't make sense. But a lot of people still don't know, how do we do it? And as I said, when you've got older organizations or larger organizations, thinking of the customer as an organization can be really, really difficult to do. I love, there's another quote that we talked about by George Colony, who's the CEO of Forrester. And he says, if a company isn't customer centric, they're simply going to be out of business in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think if you look at a lot of the research that's done, this drive around customer centricity is becoming something that is bigger and bigger, and there's more demand for it. And customers are voting with their feet. If an organization isn't listening, isn't giving them the experience, the value they want, people do shift. And as we both said, I think you will see the ability to change just grow. And I think, now we look in the SaaS world, in the subscription world, a year's subscription, very typical. That's still quite a long time. If you look in the consumer world, Netflix is brilliant. Netflix is a subscription business. You renew every single month, but you don't think about it. And it's that kind of mindset that we want. You shouldn't even have to think about it. The value's just there from it. I think it brings me on to a great question to ask for you, Jason. What actions do you think that we could look now, individuals on the call here, that they can take to actually help their company transform into a customer-centric organization?
Oh, that is a great question, because we want people to take bold action and go and do something. And I think one of the first things is that people really do need to start by creating a shared vision at the executive team of really what does it mean to be customer-centric, and what does it look like, or what would it look like if your entire organization is behaving and acting in a cohesive customer-centric manner? And how would you recognize those actions that says, this is how I know my people are being customer-centric? And if you can't answer that question, if you can't recognize the behavior when you see it, then you probably are not going to get it. So starting there to sort of say, what is it? And also make sure the executives understand the need for it. Because, again, this whole idea that in a B2B perspective, that any individual can control their own behavior, but it's really hard, especially on a frontline level, or if you're in a really large organization, to help steer the entire organization. And some cultures don't really allow that. And you can get slapped down pretty hard if you go outside the standards of behavior in your own organization. So really getting the top to have an understanding that this needs to happen in order to continue to renew and expand is really key. And then I think once you have that vision, really helping to blow that out into a strategy and a robust plan for how are you going to remain customer-centric? How is it going to evolve? How will you achieve it? But then once you're there, how do you keep it going? What are the steps and processes that you need to really have that behavior continuing over the life of your organization? And as you start to think through all those things and trying to figure out, okay, we've got to change our behaviors, we've got to change our decision-making, we need to change how we engage and listen to our customers and lead our customers. What does that mean in terms of process and structure within our organization? What's the infrastructure we need to remain agile and relevant and help all of our different teams align? Many times when we're working with customer success teams, there's a realization at some point that, our team can impact so much, but what we really need to do is get the rest of our organization aligned around this customer success idea. How do we get sales folks to sell our products in a way that help us set up our role and help us set up for renewals? How do we make sure product is listening in terms of what the customer is telling, what they really need to achieve a better business outcome, and factor that in? How do we do a better release process? How do we do better business reviews and success plans with our customers? And what quickly becomes obvious is that the organization itself needs to do a lot of internal change to really adjust to be customer focused and customer centric. And in fact, some of our clients, we found they spend the customer success team spending 35 to 45% of their team just trying to align their internal organization. And many times they don't have the executive commitment that they need and the executive support that they need to get there. So really recognizing that right up front is pretty key, I think.
I think you're so right there. Really, it's that customer centricity and recognition from the top down. I think you do need that executive level sponsorship for that.
Oh yeah, you can waste so much time and effort if you don't have that. If if they don't understand the compelling need for this. And I think that comes really back to the heart with the subscription economy. It really has fundamentally changed the business model for so many organizations, and it has driven this required change in how you engage with customers and what it means to create value for them. And surprisingly, many leaders, especially in old established organizations, are really struggling to understand the impacts of these shifts. Where I think a lot of new startups that are coming up, they sort of embrace it from the very beginning and they understand this, so they're approaching it differently, and they don't quite have that same baggage there. You and I were talking, and I thought you made a great point as well too, is really making sure that you get someone from every team in the organization to meet with the customers on a regular basis and to really understand what it is, what a success is for them and what customer centricity means for the customer. And you were mentioning that, I think it was Brad Smith, the CEO of Intuit, gets everyone out there to go and do it. And I think that's really key. And, I think there's also the idea of at McDonald's, they're famous for at least once a year, all the executives go out and work in a restaurant at least once a year to remind them, this is what our customers want. This is the experience we're creating for them. What do we need to learn from this kind of thing? And I think more and more organizations get so busy with their day-to-day stuff that may be an afterthought, or they're not really embracing the customers as much as they have, or they should.
You know, the really interesting thing is there that both of those examples that we've just talked, McDonald's and Intuit, they're not new companies, right? And they're not small companies. You know, if you look at Intuit, is a brand with a 30-year-old history. And so Brad Smith, as you said, he really is about the customer. Right? And his quote there is, "Customer obsession is the compass that is guiding us to the future." And I love, he has what he calls a 3-down or a 3-point top-down customer plan. And the first one is enable everybody to feel the customer pain. And that is this, get every single person in the organization once a year to go and see a customer. Now, the practicalities of that are very, very difficult to do, and that can take a lot of time. But I think if you start with that mindset, and it's, I want somebody from every team to meet the customer, or you can start saying, well, I'm going to do a customer workshop internally, bring my customers, have them meet different people from different teams. It's about that mindset, and I think it's really, really pivotal to doing it. Another way of doing it is actually be a customer. I mean, there's loads of TV programs that I've seen where they get the CEO of certain organizations to go and pretend to be a worker, but be a customer. Put yourself there as a customer to be sold to, be someone to be supported to. You know, actually work with and listen to what your customers are saying so you can hear the voice through there, and have not just you're at the exec level, but different stakeholders in different teams actually being customers. And it's a really critical thing to do.
You're so right. And I think ultimately what we're talking about too is really for many organizations that this is a huge cultural shift and a huge, when you think of that and you think of who are the people that we want in our organization to represent us and how do we want them to engage with customers, for many organizations, this is a huge job shift and expectations on performance and skill set, that there's an HR component to this as well too, to really get that B2B group to become customer-centric. And as you're shifting, you may find that some of the processes that you've had before, some of the skills that you're recruiting for, some of the development plans that you have for folks no longer fit with what you want to create this new culture and way of working, way of engaging with folks. So you need to involve the HR folks and look at everything from incentive systems to staffing. And in some situations, you may find that the shift that you're going for in your organization is quite significant, that some of the people that are in there may not want to be the ones that you have going forward. They may not be able to make that shift, and making sure that you're very clear and intentional about the future of your organization. And if it's not something that is for everyone, that's okay. You know, and people need to know that they have options and say, hey, if this isn't the right fit for me anymore, where you're going, let's figure out some other alternatives for me, and a way that, you know, if worst case, an exit strategy where we leave as friends. But that's what it means, I think, also to be bold, is to say, look, this is so important that if we need to shift around how we do our business, we may need to shift around who is in our business. And that's a pretty bold statement, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think this also leads into some of the things we've been talking about, Jason, which is, where does innovation fit in with being customer-centric?
I think it's a great point. I think innovation is one of those things that we've probably been talking about innovation as a function almost for maybe 10 years or so. But where does innovation sit? I mean, for me, innovation, and that's the ability to bring new ideas into a business, really should sit within every team. It shouldn't just be one team. You shouldn't you don't have an innovation department. I've seen some businesses try that. But I want to try and give, you know, in teams that I've led and built, I try and give individuals a certain portion of their time in a week to actually focus on new things. There's ideas like hackathons, you know, how can you make a difference to customers? But I think what you try and do is bring that element of doing new things in every single different team. And it's got to be a real mix of listening to what our customers are saying and help fixing problems that they're having and going to have, but also leading the customers. And there's a real balance between the two. We talked about it earlier on, but we want to help drive our customers. We don't just want to be responding to problems they're having, but we want to be there as the leaders for them and showing the ongoing and additional value they're having. And I think you all know, or you need to be there as the thought leaders for your customers and go against some of the conversations and talk tracks they might be having, but actually challenge them. You know, the world is changing so fast. If you look at the impact that technology is having, mobile technology, social media, things like AI. I was talking earlier this morning with someone about big data, the Internet of Things, where that applies and how you look at data analysis and data analytics around that. there's so much that's changing, but our customers want us to help them. They're paying us, and so we're using us as trusted advisors. So you've got to think like that for them. And I think it is the point that we talked about earlier on. It said, don't try not to think like a politician. It's not about popularity. It's about, we need to tell our customers what we think the right thing for them to do is, and be challenging, throw some bold statements out there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, customers, they're looking for new ideas and better ways of doing things. And many times they're so busy with their own day-to-day life that they don't have time to think through different alternatives or different visions for this, but they want someone to bring it to them. And many customers are very appreciative when you do. And I think also, a question for organizations that are trying to become more, customer-centric or more innovative is asking the question, what prevents innovation from happening and taking hold in our organization? What's getting in the way, what barriers can we remove so that when a good idea comes up, whether it's in an individual team or across some other group, that we can really get people energized and excited and put it into action. So I think, understanding that can go a long way to helping free up your organization as well, too.
I think you're so right. And I think, yes, when it comes to the customers, the function that can innovate best is customer success. And I think we're out there with the voice of the customer, but there are so many different things we can do. There's something that we talked about earlier, was this bringing the voice of the customer into every meeting. Bring the feedback in, good, bad, ugly feedback. Bring it into meetings. Share that feedback with everybody. It's a really, really good thing to do. And I think there are ways that we run meetings, the way that we share details with a business. Make sure you're sharing it. Don't keep it to yourself. So I think there are things that you can do within your own functions to be more bold and actually share customer feedback.
I agree a whole bit. And I think that really goes into one of the things we were starting to talk about as well, is what are some ideas and actions that we think people can take to be bolder at work and to really make these big shifts. And Jason, I loved one of the things that you brought up, which was, a lot of organizations still have that legacy mindset and way of thinking. And I just love that term, a legacy mindset. And how do you go in and shift that and really challenge some assumptions or give people some new evidence to start to think differently and sort of ask the question, does this still make sense in today's world? This may have worked for us in the past.
That's such a key thing. It's a difficult thing to do, challenging a legacy mindset. That is the hardest part to do. That level of change is a fundamental change that you're asking people to make, not just a change in a framework or a way of doing things, but a change in a way of thinking. And I think you've got to be bold and you've got to be prepared to get resistance, but you're there to show the value of it and really make it a positive message. We talked in our last session about the customer leadership roles, and I'm really a big fan of the growing role of the chief customer officer. And I think one thing that really does is it sends such a positive external message to your customers, saying, actually, that there's a team, a function here that is about the customer. It's not just about a job title change, of course. That doesn't do it, but it helps with it. And I think there's other things, like, as I said earlier on, bringing the feedback into team meetings, into all your meetings, into your all hands meetings. But bring the customer feedback into meetings, every single meeting. And that I think we can do. As customer success, we are closest to the voice of the customer. It's relatively straightforward for us to kind of get the information and then position it in the right way in meetings. There was an idea that I heard of at a CIO conference where we were talking about the idea of a customer feedback wall. So like a Kanban style wall where you've got columns on a wall talking about what customers said that's really good, what was really bad, but make it a visual thing. Make it so in front of everybody in the office, but don't worry about it. It's feedback. We all want to learn from it. And I think there are things like that you can start looking at doing.
Oh, I agree. And with feedback's a gift, and you can't get upset, you can't get wrapped up in negative feedback, but you have the opportunity to learn from it and grow. And I would rather know what customers are thinking and experiencing than to have to guess and not know it. It's some data point for making better decisions. And another thing we talked about that I think for being bold is to really just get in there and throw out the current engagement model completely and think about, if you were to start from scratch, what would this look like? What would make more sense given today's world, today's technology, your customer base, the competition and the alternatives that they face, and really sort of dream big and say, this is what an ideal situation would look like, and then work back from there. And I think related to that, though, is take that long-term view. One of the things that we often talk about is, what's a customer relationship look like if we wanted a 5-year renewal or 10-year or even a 20-year renewal? And I've written a blog article about a 20-year renewal, and really, thinking through with my customer, I want you to stick with me for the next 20 years. What do I need to do to deliver so much value and such a great experience over a 20-year life cycle that not only will you renew, but you'll expand and be delighted to do it? And what does that look like? And changing that shift from, just processing an order or, hey, I just need to get you through this quarterly business review, that opens up a lot of possibilities and a lot of thinking to things that would impact that experience. So I think getting that long-term vision, that long-term piece and working backwards from there, then you can really start to say, let's trace this all the way back to the very first experience this customer has with us when they're first becoming aware of us, almost like in that marketing phase, even before they've spoken to a salesperson, and map it out that entire journey and sort of say, how does everything need to fit together every piece of the way? And once you start to think through that, and I think you can involve team members from across your organization, then sort of map out how you transition from where you are into that great future state. One of the things I do like, if you look at Tesla and Elon Musk and some of the things that he does, and he definitely goes to the beat of his own drum, but rethinking car companies, rethinking the sales process, rethinking where the market's going and what makes sense and where you're going to go. That kind of activity is bold. And I think that's a great vision for, okay, that's new, that's different. What parts of that can we learn from it and bring into our own organization?
I think you're so right. And I think it is, this is a different way of thinking, and it might seem utopian, it might seem too far reaching, but I think there are some tactical things that we can do. There are some smaller things that you can start saying, well, actually I can do this. And a lot of it is around customer conversations, getting people to talk to the customers, understanding what the voice of the customer is, and replaying that voice of the customer back. I've worked with business as well, where we've looked at kind of compensation models and how you can link them to customer-led objectives, and look at each team having customer objectives where the customer's at the forefront of what they're doing, and don't try and just internalize it, but start thinking, how do we think about the customer? And I think what that also impacts then is how people's behavior is, and it can change your mindset. It isn't an overnight change, lots of these things, and it does take time, but this is what's required. You've talked about kind of your 5, 10, 15, 20-year renewals. We need to think about this. When customers can shift 1 year, 2 years down the line, we need to think, what do we do to make sure that they're still getting value from us and still want to be our customer in a longer time frame? So think longer term. And I think you have to be bolder to do this and challenge what we're doing. Quite often we're targeted, particularly in startup organizations. I've worked with a good number of them. You are targeting those early years quarterly. There are investor numbers you've got to do, or even stock market numbers you've got to look at, but try and think beyond quarterly objectives. Think customer journey. You talked about it there, and your customer journey starts the moment somebody speaks to you, but is the customer at the forefront of that? And that journey only ends when a customer leaves, and it doesn't actually end then. You can still engage with customers, but I think you've got to have this longer term mentality, and that for me is a fundamental part of one of the roles that customer success plays. And it's I've always talked about partnerships and long-term relationships, and this is exactly what it is. We're delivering value to our customers. We as success teams are not there as salespeople. We're there as delivering ongoing, growing value. And I think that implies a partnership. I spoke to someone earlier today talking about trusted advisor. You are that trusted advisor. You want to do the right thing for your customers, and it can be difficult sometimes. So I think do start thinking longer term, which can be difficult to do, and it can push your own managers, your own boss, your own directors.
Right.
That is the way you do.
I agree. It's interesting even too, just talking about the customer journey and all those things, and what often comes up in customer success conversations is the ideal customer profile. And sometimes even just flipping that question on its head, what would our customers say is their ideal vendor profile? What is it that they truly want? And are we living up to that? And sometimes even asking that question. So a lot of times I think when people are talking about their ideal customer profile and ideal customer journey, they're still very them focused and really flipping that around, saying, what do we need to do to earn our customers' business and loyalty, and what would they tell us? If they've got a lot of vendors and suppliers they can go to, they're going to pick their ideal one. Are we it? And if not, what do we need to do?
That's such a great point, isn't it? And you all talk about ideal customer profile, but what is our customers' ideal vendor profile? Why are they with us? Start thinking about these things. I think that's really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What we'd like people to do, as part of this, have a think at some of the insights that we hopefully have shared. Other things that you guys can do. The beginning of next year is just around the corner. A week and a bit away, 2 weeks away. But are there things that you can do come the 1st of January 2019 that you can start helping your companies, your businesses, or your customer, on their own customer-centric journey? Have a think about what are the specific actions you'll take. What would you be doing differently in 6 months' time? Try and be truly customer-centric. And Jason and I, we said these are monthly sessions. Please do feedback. We would really love to know what things you can do, what changes you've made, what's worked, what hasn't worked. So do feedback to us. We've got a couple of questions that people have submitted in advance that we're going to run through now. Jason, I'll read a couple of them off. I think we've talked through some of them, but I'll bounce them over to you. The first couple are around tips for driving that truly customer-centric culture. And does it have to be top-down only, or can it be more bottom-up? And I think we've touched on them, but is there any more insights that you can give around that?
No, I don't think it has to be top-down only. I think it's easier and faster if it's top-down and trying to figure out what that needs to look like. But if it is bottom-up, I think there's a few things. One, as we said, be bold and, don't be afraid to share some alternative views or suggestions. Here's a better way to do this, or simply asking the question, why are we doing it this way? Does it still make sense? Is there a better way that would be better for our customer? But recognizing too that bottom-up can be slower and harder, but if there's nothing that prevents you within your organization, within your team, from doing great things, start to do that. But also make sure if you are doing that you share your successes with the others, and that you're modeling the behavior and you're modeling the outcome that it had, so that people can go and follow along. And then if you are doing it that way, always make sure you have an ask. Ask others to do X. Ask others to do Y, so that they can be more customer-centric, and see how it goes there. But one of the things that's great is if you are someone who is passionate and energetic and you've got a better way to do this, in many organizations, if you're very intentional and very creative of how you do it, you can get your own nice shining rising star in the organization by demonstrating the success from that. So Jason, I think that also comes back to the question then, or the next one, which was, do you know of any names that come to mind when you would think of as companies which have really succeeded in transforming into a true customer-centric customer?
Yeah,
we spoke about a few.
We did. These are conversations that I when we were speaking to you earlier on, I recall some of the companies that we spoke about. I actually were ones that resonated when I had the same conversation a couple of years back. And interestingly, we touched on it earlier on. I think a lot of them are B2C. In fact, I think all of them are. But it's interesting. I think you're beginning to see that shift. So I think, well, actually, no, they're not all B2C. So Amazon, I think really is a customer that does put the customer at the forefront of what they're doing. And they are all about that experience. One of the great things that Amazon does is they empower their individuals to make customer decisions without having to go through multiple steps. There are lots of challenges with Amazon still, but I think they're a great organization when it comes to customer experience. And they do, yes, B2C, we know Amazon as consumers, but look at their AWS services. So they are there as a B2B service. I think they're a brilliant example. Disney, I think, are also another good one. They're renowned for customer experience, but it is about outcomes. You know what they're there to deliver, and they want to deliver the best service. And then the other one we've mentioned a few times here, we've talked about Intuit. I think they absolutely driven from the top down, interestingly, have got the right approach. And then Netflix. Netflix is a really good organization. And that, for me, there's conversations that I've heard recently about product-driven customer success. And I think that's something that Netflix does really, really well. Were there any other ones that you could think of?
I think there are a couple others out there. But I think, you look at the high-end companies like a Ritz-Carlton or a Rolls-Royce or something like that, which is sort of the gold standard. And I think for organizations, if they need an aspirational goal, especially in the B2B space, say to yourself, we want to be the Rolls Royce of X. We want to be the Ritz-Carlton of our industry. So I think there are a lot out there, but I really have struggled to find B2B ones, and I'd be really excited to learn. If anyone else on the call thinks of others or knows of others, please share that with us as well too. We'd love to hear that.
I think it's interesting because I a number of the organizations I've worked with over the last few years have been more B2B, and I think what you're seeing with a lot of B2B ones is they're going on a journey. So none of them have kind of very, very, very far down the line yet on being customer centric, but they're all on journeys at different points and going through their own transformation there, which I think is really key.
Yep, I agree.
I think the next question someone's asked, I'll give this one to you, Jace, to answer, is are there any best practices for customer-centric success management in SaaS?
There definitely are. I think there's a lot more common practices than best practices per se. But one that I highly recommend that I think is very effective is when you're starting a new relationship with a customer or meeting with them, really just be honest about the relationship itself and say, look, we want to have a 20-year relationship with you or 10-year relationship with you. And we know that the only way that's going to happen is if we create so much value for you and give you such a great experience all the way through that you'll be delighted to renew and expand with us. So let's just set that as our goal right up front. Now work with me to, let's work together to figure out what that needs to look like for you as a customer. And then we'll work backwards from there and we'll set some expectations of what we can deliver and what you'll deliver to create this experience. Because it really is a joint experience. The vendor doesn't do everything. But I think many organizations, that's their implicit goal and they want to have it, but they're afraid to come right out and say it. Where throw that out early in the relationship and set this expectation that we want to do everything right, but we need to know what that is. And we have a lot of resources we can bring, but we need to understand from you what you actually need so we prioritize the right things and go from there. And I think if more organizations would just be direct in having those discussions with the customer about the type of relationship that they want and that they're explicit about this, that would be a key thing. And then I think the other piece is really, once you've started to figure out how you're going to work with your customer closer to be customer-centric, making sure that those relationships and that information, to your point, come all the way back into the organization so everyone understands how what they're doing, whether you're in product, finance, marketing, sales, is impacting customers and impacting that customer relationship and customer experience. And if things need to change, be able to call it up to the attention of the executives and call it out to the individuals who are not behaving accordingly. So it does require some bold action and it requires some bold leadership.
I think one of the key things to look at is look at your data. There's a lot of information as a SaaS business that you have around usage, adoption, what your customers are doing with the data. Are you bringing the data in from all the different sources correctly? What can you do around that? So I think putting the right amount of investment in what your data should look like, what your customer data is, then how does that fit into the different elements of the customer journey is really critical. The other thing that I really do like is make sure you've got a kind of either a single view of your customer, a 360 view of the customer that you can share internally. You as a customer success or us as customer success professionals, it's critical that we have that customer view as to what our customers are doing, but that has to be built into your product. And if you can build that as a dashboard for your customers to see that as well, and you can start looking at the reviews, the QBRs, EBRs, customer value reviews, can you make that a dashboard that customers can see? I think there's a lot of information that we can do around that and a lot of changes we can do.
Yep, that's a good one. So Jason, another question we have is, would love to hear your thoughts on getting leaders of teams distantly removed from the customer on board with Customer-Centric.
It's great that, because I think that kind of goes to the essence of what the problem is, doesn't it? And we, is your chief exec, he or she, are they speaking to customers? Have you got the voice of the customer? Are they listening to customers? So I would absolutely say here, if you think you've got problems like that, bring that voice of the customer feedback into a meeting. Feel free to bring an email, depending on the organization, but bring in, it might need to be sanitized slightly to start with, but bring in feedback from a customer, good and bad, but start showing them what customers are saying. And also, I think what leaders want to do who are perhaps more removed is they want to see how customers are using the product. They want to see the value. So they want to see the good side of it as well. So I'd really get out there and start sharing more about the customer feedback. And get your customers to come in. There are organizations I've worked with that have been challenged with getting people out, but I've then seen massive benefit when you get the customer success function to have a customer come in. But as part of whether you run that as a QBR or a customer value review, get people from all the teams, including your leadership team, to come in and talk to the customer. Nothing beats that. And that really is, it's about those relationships. It really is. And I think there's a lot you can do around that.
Yep, I agree. If someone's unable or unwilling to come in and talk to a customer and to learn from them, that's clearly a sign that you're not customer-centric.
Yeah. That I think is a problem. And if it's a problem that continues, I would do what you can to keep try and get the message out there with other teams, with other stakeholders. If you're seen as the only person that's doing it, try and widen your sphere of influence. But it needs to be, this isn't, I think the problem you see is when this is just customer success, banging the drum of the customer, that's when there are problems.
Yep, I agree. And then final couple questions, I'll kind of blend these into one is, the question is, have we ever actually seen or perhaps know this sort of top-down approach to customer centricity within the structure of the organizations you work with? Have we actually seen it happen? It sounds a bit utopic here. So I guess people are wondering, does this really exist, or is this the unicorn out there?
I think I was, saw the question earlier, and I think, yeah, a lot of what we're talking about might seem as it's the holy grail of how businesses should be. Some of it maybe, but I do think that the point that George Colony said that if you're not being customer centric or not seen to being more customer centric, you really won't be here. I think a lot of businesses are going to really struggle with this. We'll see mergers, acquisitions. We'll see the businesses out there that are really doing the right thing for customers really lead the way here. So yes, it might seem utopic what we're talking about, but I think there are absolutely some things you can do. And I as a customer know that the kind of organization I want to work with, when the experience is right, when the outcomes are right, I know it ticks the right boxes. And I think we are absolutely going to see more and more and more of that. So yeah, it might seem utopic, but I think it is going to be something that we're going to see more and more of.
Yeah, and I actually, several years ago, I did work on a large long-term project with a very large Fortune 100 company. And they were looking top to bottom at their sales, service, and marketing process across all their European operations. It did massive adjustments to those, really did some blue sky thinking, consolidated a whole bunch of call centers and behavioral practices. And they really did start out with the visions around what should this look like and how will we know if we are doing it well. So they tried very hard to do it and to get there and to really say, will this make sense for the customer? Will this make sense for our business? When it started to get into the practical terms of how it got there and how they executed against it, I think they struggled a little bit and it took longer to get where they were going. So a bit of it is very fanciful, but I think it's also more and more organizations are realizing that because of the subscription way things are moving and how fast things are changing and easier it is to get things done, we need to be even more responsive going forward. So while I don't think we're there yet, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, organizations that are going to survive and thrive are the ones who are going to get there very quickly because they have no choice. And necessity is a great thing for spurring innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone so much. Before we head off, we do have our next session is coming up on January 15th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And we'll be talking about aligning sales and customer success. So there is a sign-up form on the Tritons website, tritons.com. We've got the Jason's Take On, you'll see that one, and we've got a February sign-up as well too, and more will be coming soon. Jason, you want to just share a little bit?
Yeah, I think that the session that we've got coming up on sales, really excited about doing that. It's one of those questions that you get a lot of the time, is customer success part of the sales organization? Where does it fit? So we're going to talk about that. I'm really excited about it. I hope everyone's enjoyed this session here and we've given you some insights. I think we've gone from that massive strategic mindset change to giving you guys a little bit more of an insight of some of the things you can do. So I hope there's some Christmas takeaways for you that you can come to the new year 2019 and actually come back to your business with. So as Jason said, I really like to thank everybody. Have a lovely holiday season. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everybody.
Great, thank you. And for everyone, here's my information. Again, with Tritons, we do training, consulting, and coaching. We have a variety of programs for both software adoption, if you're the buyers of software, and on the customer success side. And if you are working in the customer success side and you're looking for some help on how to better engage your customers, we work firsthand with a lot of them to help them get success with technology. We'd love to figure out how we can work together. And we do have a variety of resources on our website, from training and workshop catalogs. We've also recently started to up our YouTube content, and we'll in 2019 be bringing more resources and materials to that. So if you get a chance, please stop by our YouTube page, tritons.com. You'll see some links to it. Would love to get your thoughts. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful time and a wonderful holiday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much. Bye now.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.